Before we begin this podcast, please be advised that the following episode contains language that some listeners may find offensive and inappropriate. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast producers. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the final part of Charles Higginbotham's story. Last time in our conversation, Charles described his hasty flight to Colorado that ended in his arrest. Now that he spent more time behind bars than in the free world, Charles reflects on what he's learned in jail on this episode of Voices of a Killer.
So you basically are presented with a plea deal of taking first-degree murder, or you may be facing death. Is that basically the gist of it?
Right. They immediately have to announce they're seeking the death penalty on you, and then they do. That's hanging over my head the entire time for the year and a half I'm in the county jail before my trial comes up. And then as trial approaches, I get closer and closer to that, and then they say, hey, we'll take the death penalty off the table if you just come in and say, here's what you did, and then we'll give you life without parole and you get to live.
How long did it take for you to decide on taking first-degree murder?
Really, I mean, it wasn't that hard because from the moment we did it, we felt bad. I already felt my life was over. So
I would bet that at 18, you're imagining things to do in your head, but once you saw this guy dead, you were probably like, oh shit, this is not something I should have done.
Exactly. And pretty much my life's over.
And that's part of the thing that I talk about on here a lot is, they say that your brain is not developed till around 25. So you were literally 7 years away from fully being developed, and you're making decisions like that. Mixed with drugs and a turbulent childhood is kind of like a recipe for shit like this.
Yeah, it's true. That's hard to face as a 49-year-old man, too, because I can never excuse taking a life, no matter what I thought, no matter what. And
you don't get to go out for parole, do you?
At this time, no. I've got life without parole unless they modify some kind of law or change something, or based on my age. No, I have no parole.
I wonder what the statistics are for people like you that have committed crimes at 18. How much you change? Because it seems like a lot of the people I talk to that have committed crimes at 16, 17, 18, even 19 and 20 sometimes, they are completely different people. It seems like they've turned into someone else. And if the term Department of Corrections is actually accurate, isn't there some correcting that's going on over 20-year, 30-year period? Do you think you deserve to be out of prison?
Boy, deserve is hard. Deserve is hard to ask for. I'd like to be forgiven. I'd like to have a chance. But forgiveness is hard to ask for. You can't.
So whenever you went to court, did you have the victim's family in there in the courtroom?
Stephanie was there. She was in the courtroom, yes.
What was her reaction to you doing that?
She didn't say anything. She just gave me an angry stare the entire time.
What would you say to her if she was listening to this?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that she ever met me. I'm sorry that I took her brother away. No matter what I thought or what was in my mind, it was not the right thing to do. I can't give him back. I admired her too. That's the hard part, is that, I admired Stephanie because I didn't have a mom that took care of me. So I admired Stephanie being a single mom, taking care of her kids. Even though that we were there getting high and doing those types of things, she cared about her kids. She worked as an assistant manager, long hours at McDonald's, and loved her kids. So I admired her. I didn't want her in any way to get in trouble, and I was scared the way it looked that she might get in trouble.
Did she?
I don't think she ever got in any trouble. The detectives kept coming and asking me questions about her forever. But, yeah, I don't think she did. I think, other than being victimized by having her brother murdered, I just hate that everyone's pain,
Yeah.
As Charles faced the grim road ahead, state prosecutors presented him with a plea deal, which took the death penalty off the table. Taking it was an easy decision for Charles. With the 2 guilty confessions in the pockets of prosecutors, the odds of getting off with Kevin's murder were next to none. Besides, Charles tells me he felt instant remorse about the murder and was ready to accept the judge's due punishment. His most painful memory of his court appearance was seeing Stephanie in the crowd with an angry and unwavering stare on her face. Charles' reflections throughout our conversation reveal a man who understands the gravity of his crime and the lasting impact it's had on others. Scientific studies show that human brains only fully develop by the age of 25, making Charles 7 years shy of that mark by the time of his crime. Should we hold perpetrators to account for the actions they took when they were underage? How much can we chalk Charles' crime up to the mind of a teenager with poor decision-making skills, somebody who didn't register the full extent of what he was doing? It's clear Charles has undergone a significant change since then. However, the harsh reality remains. Unless future laws change, Charles will serve the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the break, I asked Charles what he intends to do with the time ahead of him.
So, did you get support from your foster or your adoptive mom while you were in there?
No, hardly. I talked a few times off and on way back when, but I haven't talked to her for many, many years now.
What about your adoptive dad?
Yeah, my adopted dad, I talked to him all the time, kept up with him until he died. He died of cancer in 2000. And my grandmother, his mom, I kept up with her until she passed away not long after that.
You know, every guy needs their mother. That's really sad that you had to go to foster, then adoptive parents, and the mother, even before your case, rejected you a little bit. And now you're telling me that you don't talk to her. That's pretty sad on her part.
Yeah, it's been hard. I haven't been the greatest son, though. I mean, it's hard because I lived with my real mom for 4 years. And so in my mind, I always thought that there was a chance, my biological mom, that like I would reconnect with her. So then when I found out she died a few years ago, that was hard.
Yeah. So Charles, your adoptive mom, is she still living?
I believe so, yes. Last I heard, yes.
What would you say to her if she's listening?
Well, that's hard too.
You have anger towards her?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of anger towards her, and I have a lot of resentment. But I'm sure she has a lot of anger and resentment towards me because I know when they adopted me, I didn't turn out to be what they wanted. And the fact that I had that 4 years with my biological mom, in my mind, I had a mom, and so my adopted mom didn't fit for me. So I know I wasn't.
Do you think maybe as a child, you had inherently just kind of pushed her away and never let her in because of what your past was?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You didn't meet her expectations as an adoptive child where you took her in as mom.
Right.
It's really sad for everybody involved because she has expectations, but she doesn't realize that nature was involved. You know, you had a mother there. It's, you know, you're just a person that had a mother and then got fostered to another mother, adopted.
We didn't communicate. That's the thing. I didn't know how to communicate. I really didn't. Up until recent years in my life, I could never really even accept love from anyone else. It was a hard thing.
So now you're taking programs, and like I mentioned earlier, you don't have any parole hearings. You're not supposed to get out of prison. What would motivate you to take these programs to better yourself instead of being like crazy in gangs and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Toby.
To help with sanity?
Yeah, to just, even though I'm confined, I'm in prison, I can feel better about my life or better about myself if I clean up myself, if I work on myself, if I improve to the best of my ability. And these programs, this intensive therapeutic community I'm in especially, is a great place for that. I'm doing the 12-step program, and I'm taking anger management classes, criminality classes, drug substance abuse classes, ICVC. It's a strict military-style program. I just had my head shaved today. We get our head shaved every 2 weeks.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
It's strictly voluntary, too. It's strictly voluntary. We volunteer.
That's a lot of programs for somebody that, in somebody's eyes, like on the outside, to us, to people on the outside, we look at your future as non-existent, yet you're taking programs to better yourself when supposedly you don't have a future. You know, it's pretty deep.
I try to pride myself on holding a job in prison. I've worked at the Braille Center for the Blind, and transcribing Braille, and transcribing textbooks into Braille.
Yeah.
In the MEMA department, which is all the math and science books.
Now 49, Charles has taken significant steps towards changing his life for the better. United States prisons offer many reform programs that prisoners can take advantage of. Most of them are geared to transitioning inmates to be back in the free world. Many prisoners also elect to do them to boost their chances of getting paroled. Charles's case is an anomaly. He has no hope of ever being released from prison. However, he derives a sense of purpose and accomplishment from participating in these programs. His future in the free world might be non-existent, but Charles wants to show his capacity for growth, even if it's in the confines of a life sentence. There's one final thought that struck me throughout my interview with Charles. Although the road ahead is long, Charles is not alone in his life imprisonment. He currently occupies the same prison as his childhood friend and accomplice to murder, Kenny Gilbert. They've taken part in school debates together, partied together, and now they've killed together. What would Kenny say if we brought him into this conversation? I wondered what Kenny thinks about Charles opening up about their crime in this interview for the public to hear, and what insight or discrepancies he might hold. In the future, I plan to track Kenny down to hear his side of this story. Before rounding off our conversation, I put that proposition to Charles.
Yeah, I got a question for you. Are you going to tell Kenny about this interview?
Yes, I am.
And what do you think he would say if I reached out to him and wanted to interview him as well?
He's actually written a book, and he's been very open and honest. He went through this ITC program back in the 90s when it first began. He's been sober for 20-something years now. He's a very honest and kind man. I know it's hard to say about a murderer.
No, I mean, like I said,
Good.
I think people change, especially whenever there's something, because like I said, I'm a completely different person than I was when I was, a child, and I think most people can say that, except for maybe a select few, but I think I am going to reach out to him if you're all right with that.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome to, although I will say that the part of it's I wanted to tell him myself when I got out of this intensive part of the program, a few of the things that I hadn't ever shared, because I hadn't shared he knows about my sexuality now, but he still didn't know, other than I've hinted around a couple of times, but he doesn't really know about Kevin.
How do you feel about me, telling him what I heard?
Yeah, you can, absolutely. I mean, I'd like him to hear it from me, but I guess he would hear it from me if you told him what I said. That's understandable, and let him know that I okayed it, that I said that, I wanted him to hear it.
Yeah. Well, Charles, I think I pretty much got the gist of it. I think if I could sum it up, it's somebody that's on the fringes of being a child that makes a decision under the influence and with a shitty past and childhood, and now you're a completely different person, yet you're going by the rules of what happened decades ago. But I am going to reach out to Kenny and via email and see if I can't talk to him. But I appreciate you opening up to me. And all right, man. Thanks. Yep. See you. Bye-bye.
On the next episode of Voices of a Killer.
Your co-defendant, Charles, you'd been knowing him since grade school, right?
Yeah, since we were 10 years old, 5th grade.
Well, so Charles has a little bit different version, and he said that you didn't know about it till way later, that him and Kevin kind of had some kind of sexual thing going on.
Yeah, I didn't know about that at all.
At all? Or you didn't know then?
Just the first I've heard about it.
How did that feel, raising that gun up and doing that?
Sick. I mean, I can't really...
Your history doesn't show violence,
No, I'm not a violent person. I don't like violence. I don't like hurting people. I don't like hurting animals and any of that.
I want to thank Charles for sharing his story with us today. His ability to be open and honest is what makes this podcast so special. That's a wrap on this episode of Voices of a Killer. A big shout out to Sonic Futures, who handled the production, audio editing, music licensing, and promotion of this podcast. If you want to hear more episodes like this one, make sure to visit our website at voicesofakiller.com. There you can find previous episodes, transcripts, and additional information about the podcast. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach new listeners. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to share more stories with you in the future. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Toby, and we'll see you next time on Voices of a Killer.